Good morning, Countryside. Pastor John here. You're probably wondering why I'm standing where I'm standing. This is the foyer of the church. I don't know if you can see that. Before we got into our devotional this morning, I kind of wanted to show you what's been going on here at the church building. And to do that, I think I'll give you just a quick little tour. As you know, because of the social distancing policies, we have not been able to gather here, which is, well, it's a bummer because I would prefer to preach to two people than to preach to a video camera. But the reality is, this is the state we're in. And so as we've been going about this, we've been trying to get as much content out to you as possible. Now that takes a little bit of work and a little bit of, modification, because we are not a church that really was set up for what we're doing right now. And it's taken a lot of work, and I want to say that most of that work has been undertaken by Bonnie. So if you do see Bonnie, I want you to, or if you can get in touch with Bonnie, just give her a big thanks, because she's doing a ton of work over and above the fact that she's a teacher and they're still doing work doing that. So I want to show you a little bit of what we've done in the sanctuary here. It's not going to look the same, but don't worry. It is all able to be put away. So as you know, we've been doing filming our sermons and our services, and we've been putting those online. But that unfortunately takes a lot more work than you might think. And I know everything behind me is awash with light right now. You probably can't really tell what's going on, but we'll walk around and I will show you all the work that Bonnie has put into this, and just to make this stuff happen. So I'm going to flip the camera around real quick. All right, so most of you know the sanctuary. For light's sake, we went ahead and dimmed some of or put curtains over some of the windows here so that we can control the light a little bit. Now, as you see, normally we don't have a tripod and a big stand in the middle of the aisle of the church, but we film over that, and we do put words up here, almost like it's a teleprompter. Don't worry, when we do go back to live services, we won't be using the teleprompter. You'll just have to see the top of my head every now and again. And that's everything back here is kind of the same. It's really once we get up here. So we've had to move a bunch of stuff around. You'll notice that the speakers aren't in the corner, and we have lights and lights and lights and cords and more lights and some more lights and some more lights. And then we put this couch up on the stage so we have a little backdrop. That's right there is really where I've been working when I'm here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Again, more lights. And then for communion services, we have the piano over here so that we can play music during the communion thing. And then we have the table here. Really, all of that has been done so that the quality that we can turn out towards for you guys is better. And so as we go about all this that we're doing, it's been a little different, and we are very excited to be able to put all this stuff back, hopefully in the near future, and get back together. But we also want to be wise and caring for those among us who are fearful of that. And so we will continue to videotape these services and get them out, and hopefully one day soon, we will be able to get together in person, which is really our hope. All right, well, let me go ahead and get us started on devotions this morning. I did do this live on my phone, so it'll be a little different. So forgive me if it's distracting, but yeah, let's talk about God's Word. I'm reading out of Matthew chapter 14, verses 26 to 33, and this is what it says. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I chose this passage this morning because I fear that we are getting to the point in this pandemic where we are getting distracted. We tend to look around and we're looking for the conspirators. We're looking for who started this. We're looking for who's responsible instead of trusting in the Lord and trusting that he is in control of all these things. And I find this passage interesting. If you remember the story from, Sunday school and the flannel graph, Jesus sent the disciples away. He had just finished preaching to a massive crowd, and he sent the disciples across the Sea of Galilee, and away they go, and the storm blows up, and Jesus is like, okay, it's time to go catch up. And so he doesn't jump in a boat, he's the Lord of all creation, so he's just walking out across the lake, and he's going to pass him by, and the disciples freak out, and Jesus calms them and says, "It's me," and there's still this storm going on around him, and then Peter's like, okay, well, Peter's being Peter. He says, well, if it's really you, then tell me to come out there. And so he goes. He doesn't get real far before he takes his eyes off Christ and he starts looking at the trouble around him. And this is an interesting passage because it tells us so much about Christ. It tells us that he is teaching his disciples about something. If you remember back in Matthew 8, there's an account of the disciples being in a boat on this same lake. And that account, Jesus is sleeping in the boat, and they come upon a storm, and Jesus doesn't wake up, and they're afraid they're going to die. And at that point, they shake Jesus, and they're like, "Get up, don't you care that we're all going to die?" And Jesus teaches them at that point. He's like, "What are you afraid of?" And he calms the storm then. And here they're in another storm, but Jesus isn't right there with them. And instead of having faith, they begin to panic again until Jesus comes by and saves them. And then, Peter does his jump out of the boat and get distracted thing. And I think the point we need to take from this is not to let the chaos around us distract us from Jesus. Don't get dragged into online debates over what this pandemic means or who started it or whose fault it is. Keep your eyes on Christ. He will sustain you. Matthew Henry actually says this about this passage. He says, "Peter walked upon the water not for diversion or to boast of it, but to go to Jesus. And in that he was wonderfully borne up." It amazes me that when Peter's eyes are on Christ, when he believes that's truly Jesus, it doesn't matter that there's a storm, it doesn't matter that there's water, it doesn't matter that there's danger. He is focused on Christ, and all of those other things fall to the wayside. It's only when he takes his eyes off Christ and he starts thinking about him and thinking about other things, other problems, that he begins to sink. And this passage doesn't tell us that if, as long as we're focusing on Jesus, everything's going to be fine and dandy. There is still a storm going on around us. There is still chaos. There are still people dying from this virus. And yet, our job as Christians is not to focus on those other things. It is to be like Christ. It is to love his people, to love the lost, and to bring the gospel into these situations. And so I guess my encouragement for you this morning is, remember, focus on Christ, because he will allow you to weather whatever storm you're going through right now. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you're the one that's hurting. Well, then focus on Christ, because he will allow you to weather the storm. It doesn't say that he's going to take you out of it. He didn't take Peter out of it. Peter, there was still a storm going on around Peter. There were still waves. There was still wind. It wasn't until Jesus got back in the boat that all of that calmed down. So he will allow you to weather the storm. And if you feel yourself going under, what does he cry? What does Peter cry? He says, "Lord, save me." And so we put our faith in Christ to save us, not in government, not in whatever else. We are good citizens. We do what we're told. We obey as long as, insofar as the government doesn't, bar us from worshiping Jesus, we're good citizens. And so when we walk through this storm, as we weather it, and that's part of the reason at the beginning of this video I showed you what's going on here. It's a little bit of a storm in this sanctuary right now. It looks like we maybe released a bunch of junior hires in here. It actually looks exactly like that after 7 years as a youth pastor. This just looks like we let junior hires do the decorating. But this storm is of little consequence when we're focused on Christ. This storm doesn't hold sway over us. Christ does. And if Christ is holding sway in your heart, then you will weather the storm. You might come through a little banged up, but then here's the promise that Christ gives. He never leaves. He's always there. And when we step into his kingdom at the end of this life or at the end of this age, everything will be made right. That is a wonderful and true blessing. And hopefully, as you rest in that today, you will feel his presence and you will feel his strength, allowing you to go through whatever you're going to go through. So we're praying for you. Love you. Hope you're encouraged today. Have a good one. And we'll hopefully see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.